Outside at 15 minutes past the 8 o'clock hour on Tuesday, June the 27th. Chris Lenois back with you on the Green Mountain Mornings program, ready for our regular Tuesday conversation with members of the media. Chris Mays of the Brattleboro Reformer in here this morning. Good morning to you, Chris.
Good morning.
And also in here is Brattleboro Community Television. They now document our meetings with members of the media on Tuesdays and Fridays, and we'd like to thank Brattleboro Savings and Loan for their financial support for this partnership with BCTV. Brattleboro Savings and Loan is an ultra-local programming sponsor of BCTV live events, municipal meetings, and these segments with Chris Mays and other folks there. And good to have you here, Chris, to talk about, first, the Select Board meeting that took place last week. That is how we try to time these, so we can debrief on some of the stories that you've written over the course of the week after a Select Board meeting. You had one on the weekend about a couple of different agenda items that came up. Now, I know you have some ins with some members of the board and the town, being the reporter here in Brattleboro. You rub elbows with these people with some regularity, right?
A little bit, I guess.
Yeah.
Every other week.
Chris is looking at me like, where's he going with this?
Yeah.
Well, so I wonder, this piece of new business during the finance report. Usually John O'Connor just kind of says this is where we are in relation to the budget during a year. But I had noticed this on the agenda that it said the board is asked to consider a transfer from the general fund to the capital fund for energy efficiency, and conservation projects as requested by Select Board member David Schoales. So I knew this was going to be a little bit different than the normal course of business during the financial report. Were you aware that he was going to make this request for money towards these energy efficiency projects prior to Tuesday night's meeting?
No, not really. And he really, I don't think, was ready for it either, because later he scrapped the idea.
Yeah,
he said I didn't do my homework.
That's the upshot of it. So I guess let's kind of run through. He had a plan in terms of the town is already going through a number of energy efficiency upgrades and doing some energy efficiency work, right?
Yeah, over $500,000 worth this fiscal year.
And
coming up.
I guess he was looking at some of the projections for a surplus as the fiscal year ends, which is next week. Well, actually, as of Friday, right? I think July 1st is the turnover date. He was expecting close to $1 million in a surplus.
Yeah, $750,000.
Yeah.
But the town finance director and town manager told him it was going to be a lot less, something closer to $100,000 to $200,000.
And that necessarily wasn't all going to be there. Some of that was already spoken for, it sounded like.
Yeah, and the finance director, John O'Connor, said I wouldn't even be comfortable taking a little chunk of that and putting it away at this point for this.
And it sounded like nobody else on the select board was comfortable with it either.
No, everybody was saying let's talk about this. For the most part, people were saying let's talk about this in the budget sessions.
Yeah, Tim Wessel, these are all from your story in the weekend edition of the Reformer. Board's fiscal responsibility. Brandy Starr, a quote that you had from her, I'd like to see it go to town meeting to get more buy-in. So people weren't necessarily aware that David Schoales was going to make this request during this meeting. I got the sense.
No, it did come as a surprise to me, I think, yeah.
I mean, or because he could have had, and I would assume that this is possible, he could have gone to John O'Connor and asked for a more accurate projection of what the surplus was going to be. I wouldn't think that would be something that John would necessarily hide from a member of the select board, right?
Yeah. I mean, when I say it was a surprise to me, it was a surprise, doing it there. But David's been a long time proponent of doing these projects sooner rather than later. I think he sees in it, major savings for the town if the sooner they do it. And he's also been a big proponent of energy projects in general. He was one of the people who were instrumental in getting the solar project planned out at the landfill at Wyndham Solid Waste. And
I'll also give him props for making sure that this town adopted the PACE program from Efficiency Vermont, the property assessed clean energy program that lets people borrow against the value of their house to do energy efficiency projects. And this is somehow guaranteed by the town. I mean, absolutely. I don't know if he is the liaison to the energy committee in town, but they certainly feel an affinity for each other.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, when he was campaigning for Senate, he went to their meeting, and that was one of the big things he stands for.
Yeah, and members of the energy committee were at the select board meeting. Tad Montgomery being one of them. I don't know if Daniel Quip is a part of the energy committee, but he's certainly somebody who advocates for a lot of climate change things, and he was there.
Yeah.
And we'll get to his little starring role in a second here. But it sounded to me like even the energy committee was not necessarily expecting David Schoales to make this request for this money transfer at this meeting. Did you get that sense?
Yeah, I don't know. I think they might have had some idea. I know they want to see these projects move forward too, but they weren't, very pushy about it, I guess I would say.
Right, because there is a plan in place, and this was the part of the meeting that I'm glad you wrote about, this municipal energy audits that was put together in 2016. Tad Montgomery talking a little bit about that when he got up to speak during the select board meeting and talking about a financing mechanism. It does sound to me that I know that David Schoales wanted to kind of hurry things along if we had a surplus, and with good reason. The quicker you invest, the quicker the return on investment comes. But it sounds to me like there actually is a plan in place for the town to do these things based on what Tad was saying.
Well, there might be a proposal coming forward, whether to put these projects to bond or some kind of other financing. But there is somewhat of a plan to get the audit, done throughout different budgets. It's altogether $1.6 million.
Right.
So they're not going to do it all in one fiscal year unless they do something like a bond, but.
Right. I wonder what if David Schoales was right about his projection of $750,000, and I was looking at that math because as you said, they're doing close to $600,000 worth of energy efficiency projects already. You could actually argue that whole surplus could go towards energy efficiency. I wonder if that would have been his motion, or how much of that surplus he would have nominated towards the motion. I guess we'll never know.
Yeah, that would have been a really big chunk.
That would have been a really big chunk.
And it is going to save the town money, I mean, as in these projections. So it's not just, an improvement project.
Now, he said, he admitted, I did not do all the homework I needed to do to make a motion. So he held that. Do we get a sense he might make a motion once we get a final number on that surplus? Is this a done deal based on what the other select board members were saying, do you think?
I think there's no meeting until July, and that starts the next fiscal year. So I don't see him making another motion.
Right, and actually not even July. It's not even the 1st of July. They're only going to have one meeting in July, I think, because the first Tuesday of the month falls on July the 4th.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have that shorter amount of meeting time for the select board. Now, I mentioned. You want to say something?
Yeah, I do think that he might, push for more spending into these projects in the budget season. But
yeah, that makes sense. Now, I did want to. You also incorporated into this story about David Schoales asking for these extra funds for energy efficiency. Another agenda item, which just had to do with fuel purchasing for the town, the heating fuel, and Daniel Quip, who I just mentioned before. One of the more visually interesting things that I've ever seen at a select board meeting. It seems like it went over well in the room.
Yeah, I actually took a picture, but I didn't put it to my story. I wasn't feeling all too well after the meeting, as you know. But BCTV put up the video on their Facebook. It's interesting. He wanted to demonstrate how much this heating oil, how much carbon dioxide it would emit and what it would look like, sort of.
Yeah, with a tape measure, and not even a big enough tape measure to make the point that he wanted to make. But I actually saw him on the steps of the Municipal Center a couple of days later and told him, really enjoyed your show there. And people should go to the BrattleboroTV.org website and check that out. Check out his demonstration about carbon emissions from the fuel purchased by the town of Brattleboro. Chris Mays of the Brattleboro Reformer, my guest here for the remainder of today's program. We'll get to some other stories that he's written about in the last week that you can find in the print edition and online at reformer.com after the bottom of the hour news break. 60 degrees outside at 21 minutes before the 9 o'clock hour. Green Mountain Mornings continuing now. Your host, Chris Lenois. Chris Mays of the Brattleboro Reformer here in the studio with me, talking about stories he's covered in the past week for the Brattleboro Reformer. You can find those online at reformer.com. Chris, I actually want to go back a weekend before the one that just passed, a story that you had there, because I only get to see you every other week now that you're, well, always, but now that you're alternating with Harmony Birch. So some stories that I want to make sure that we keep people apprised of here in the community, including Darah Kenemuyi leaving as executive director of Brattleboro Community Justice Center. He had announced this, that his last day is sometime at the end of August. First of all, there might be some listeners out there who aren't aware about what the Brattleboro Community Justice Center is. So can you give some background on that?
Yeah, they're really about restorative justice, bringing people back into the community and starting the healing process between the community and the offender. They'll do things, but they also it doesn't just stop there. They also offer other programming to people like safe driving, and they do these circles where they meet with community members, and they talk about their re-entry into the community. And it doesn't mean that it's not just necessarily for people who went to jail, but it's also for people who have done some kind of an offense.
And there are people who are residents of, is it just Brattleboro? Is it the surrounding town? Who do they serve in addition to Brattleboro? Isn't it more people than just this town?
Yeah, it's for Windham County.
Yeah, for all of Windham County. But it's a town position, if I'm reading this correctly. Somehow it is affiliated with the town of Brattleboro and the municipal government.
Yeah, the town acts as its fiscal agent. So when they get grants, they're funded through the Department of Corrections. The money goes through the town to them, and they have an office inside the municipal center.
Had you had much chance to do stories about the restorative justice and things like that? I think I've seen your byline on some stories about that in the past.
Yeah, I've done a couple stories. When Darah first went in there, I interviewed him, and then he's also suggested other stories because they work with the high school. The high school has a class on restorative justice or social justice, and they do activities, and there's a social justice week, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's really the program itself, when we think of ourselves as a progressive community right here, it embodies a lot of those values in this, and it doesn't get enough play. But now Darah leaving, and this was part of the plan all along.
Yeah, he stepped in temporarily because they were having difficulties finding somebody to fill the position when the former executive director left, Larry Hames.
Yeah, and so it was always he was basically a board member and said he was going to do 2 years and then try and transition out. But it sounds like a lot of the things that they need to do to get their ship in order for whoever's going to come in as this executive director was kind of his goals here. Talk a little bit about some of the milestones he pointed to in your story.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff was really internal stuff, like drafting new bylaws. Yeah, I'm thinking
easy for
about
me to say.
my industry.
Yeah, bylines.
And they also updated the memorandum, the understanding with the town.
Yeah, so they're in good shape. He's leaving them in good shape, and he's not leaving the organization. He's just stepping away from the leadership role, it sounds like.
Yeah, he still plans on volunteering.
Yeah, and a lot of volunteers. I didn't know that. Over 50 volunteers and staff members combined, I think I read.
Yeah. Some people might not be as active these days, but that was what his last count was, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, an essential program for a community like this, and great to know that it is in good shape. I will say this, you say at the end of the story how people can find out more information about that executive director's job. So I went to Brattleboro.org as well as to the BrattleboroCJC.org website, found no job posting for executive director in either place.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So if anybody from the town of Brattleboro is listening right now, if you want really to fill this job, you might want to post the job.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Just putting that out there. That's not your fault. Let's switch over to the Deerfield Valley now. You cover both Brattleboro and the Deerfield Valley for the Reformer, and a story about the Hermitage Club. And after all the stories we talk about environmental commissions and Act 250 and select board meetings, it must have felt good to actually talk about the project getting underway here. This long discussed project that the Hermitage Club has done to try and develop Haystack Mountain they're finally breaking ground on some of the properties.
Yeah, after reporting about the troubles with tax payments and all 2 weeks ago, I was really excited to do this story. And so were the people at the Hermitage, because this is really a step in the right direction in terms of getting everything in order and their plans set. They're going to be building 8 townhomes near Haystack, and it's part of this master plan idea that they have, and it had to get approved by the state, and it took a long time to get that approval. So they were really celebrating this first project, which is part of a big project.
Yeah, I mean, these 8 townhomes is just scratching the surface of it, and
Right.
a lot of the details in your article. But at this point, all the bureaucracy, all the red tape is behind them. It's all about build now.
Well, for each of the construction projects, they'll have to get more permits.
Oh, okay. So there's a different Act 250 process for each one of the phases of their master plan?
Yeah, so I don't expect them to say, yes, we got another
Okay.
permit every time, but this is a big deal for them.
It still is a big, especially because there are people waiting to buy these. These units are almost all of them are already sold, right?
I believe 7 of them are in some kind of payment process.
Yeah. So they're feeling like they're actually getting money for
Yeah.
their investment. That's got to feel good for. I'm sure they had a very different approach to you calling them about this story than some of the other ones you've called them about in the past.
Oh yeah, they sent me the press release and said, "Hey, we have some good news for you," and I was like, "Awesome."
Nice. At least they had a good sense of humor about that. But yeah, great story there as far as these 8 units. Timeline for when these get done, do we know?
These first 8, I think, are going to be ready for the ski season, but they're
okay.
going to start another 8 that are tied into this project, and I think those won't be ready until sometime after that ski season.
Yeah, and they point out these 8 units alone. Is that right? These 8 units alone, over $10 million in revenue for the club.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that's great news for them, as well as all the construction workers, all the contractors there who are working on the project over there in the Deerfield Valley. Switching to the schools now, you had a story about the Dover 4th graders getting involved in a civic engagement process here that actually led to a tangible change in the town and some of their the way they're going to possibly brand some of their stationery and maybe even some of their vehicles going forward. Talk a little bit about this Town Seal project, how this came into being for this group of 4th graders.
Yeah, the class was taking a course on civics. So their teacher brought them to the town office, and they were looking at different things, and the town clerk showed them the town seal, which just had the name Town of Dover, Vermont on it. And some of the kids said they thought that was pretty boring.
Yeah, in the way that a kid probably is, just, so honest about it. Stefan Tellini is the one that you quoted here in the story. Did I say it right?
I think it's Stefan Tellini.
Stefan Tellini.
Yeah.
Okay, we saw it and thought it was just boring.
Yeah. So then his classmates, well, they all drew what they thought should replace the old one, and Olivia Chase drew the one that was the winning one, and it had snowflakes and a pine tree in it.
Yeah, and she has a connection, a graphic designer in the family.
Yep.
So they were able to make this up, and the town is going to use this.
Yeah, they switched out one of the tools. I forget what it's called offhand, but yeah.
It's basically what they emboss. The
embosser,
is
yeah.
that what it's called? The
Yeah.
embosser. It's almost like it's when you notarize something, you have your notary seal, and then it's like, yeah, this is the imprimatur of the town of Dover on there, and there's pictures of it in the story, as well as I'm sure on the Reformer.com website. So the select board and the rest of the town of Dover probably felt this was a pretty good exercise too. They got a nice seal done by some students at very little, probably no cost to them.
Yeah. Well, the embosser I think was like $70 to
Okay,
replace. But
right.
yes, and but yeah, the select board members came to the morning sing they do on Fridays, and they said, "Look at this. You guys can make change if you want to. So if you see something that needs to be changed, come and make sure you step up."
Yeah, well, and you pointed out that the original embosser could have been made back in the 19th century. Even,
Yeah.
I mean, so lasting change. I mean, change that is going to last beyond these fourth graders' time in Dover. I mean, that's pretty incredible. I think
Yeah.
that was cool too. Did the town clerk just have this historical information at his fingertips, Andy McLean, because he gave you some nice background on it.
Yeah, yeah. I sat in his office with him, and he knows a lot about the history of the town.
Nice, nice. Well, it's got to feel good to do stories like that about students and things they're doing. I know you had a couple of them
Yeah,
in the past week. That Dover student story about the fourth graders was on Friday, and on the Wednesday previous to that, you were at Brattleboro Area Middle School with some eighth graders there who have a pretty ambitious television project underway.
yeah. They showed me parts of it. They didn't want to ruin the ending, but they basically took experiences they've had at in their school and made it into a comedy.
Flaws
Yeah,
is what it's called.
yeah, and their characters are sort of loosely based on them, even though they say no relation. They joke, but yeah, they're hoping to get it in the New York Television Festival, and they have plans to show at ITV Fest, which has moved to Manchester this year.
Yeah, and there's four of them: Miles, Anton, Nolan Holmes, Jonah Bingham, Sam Friedis Egan. Some of them behind the camera, some of them in front of the camera, but it sounds like they're all kind of equals in the creative process.
Yeah, yeah. I know Miles. He's been really involved in film projects for a while now. He used to be at Dover School. That's how I met him.
Okay.
And yeah, he had a show that aired at ITV Fest last year.
All right. Well, good luck to those budding young artists. And Chris, I know you've got a busy week ahead of you after being a little bit under the weather for the past week. Tell the listeners out there a little bit of what you're going to be working on this week that they'll see in the paper.
Well, today I'm going to be writing about the tax sale Wilmington just had.
All right.
A few of the bigger properties came off the list at the end of the week last week, so it's not going to bring in as much money as they wanted to because they're facing a big deficit, which is, it's sort of good news because these are commercial properties. You want to see something good happen, but on the other side of it, they're short revenue, so...
Right, kind of like they could have gotten some short-term gain, but long term, it sounds it's going to be better for the town. Is that a fair assessment?
I think they're hoping, yeah.
Did you buy anything at the auction?
No.
You didn't bid on anything. All right. Well, thanks for coming in this morning.
Thank you.
All right, and we'll be back to wrap up this edition of Green Mountain Mornings right after these messages.